Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're doing a deep dive into the absolute latest from the AI world, straight from the News Digest, May 30th, 2025.
Right. And there's quite a bit happening.
Yeah, we got some pretty significant model breakthroughs, fascinating steps towards understanding how these things actually think.
Interpretability stuff.
Exactly. Plus, shifts in the hardware race and glimpses into, well, AI agents and maybe how we'll use them for more complex stuff.
So yeah, lots of aha moments ahead, hopefully. We're looking at DeepSeek's new models, Anthropic's interpretability library.
NVIDIA's CEO making some waves.
Right, those chip comments. And autonomous software engineers. Yeah, you heard that right.
That sounds wild.
And Perplexity's new platform, Labs. It's really a snapshot of just how fast everything's moving.
It really is. So let's start with DeepSeek. Some analyses are saying they're really leading the charge in open weights now.
Yeah, that's the claim. They just put out their R10528 model.
R10528.
R10528. And the report suggests it's a serious upgrade, like maybe reaching the level of some of the top closed models.
Wow, okay. That's a big statement.
It is. Artificial Analysis was quoted saying China, specifically DeepSeek, has unambiguously taken over the open weights leadership. That's, yeah, quite the declaration.
Unambiguously.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's making this R1 model such a big step up? What are the specifics?
Well, the improvements seem to be pretty broad. Better benchmark scores, obviously. Fewer hallucinations, which is always good.
Definitely.
Better support for structured stuff like JSON output, function calling, and importantly, it's open weights. MIT license.
The license is key.
Crucial for people actually using it. And apparently, no API changes from their previous model.
Oh, that's smart. Makes adoption way easier for developers.
Exactly. Smooth transition.
So the benchmarks, do they really back up this idea of competing with closed models, leading the open pack?
Yeah, they certainly show some big jumps, particularly in areas that people often link to, like deeper reasoning. So numbers cited show intelligence boosts on tests like AIME 2024, that's advanced math, up 21 points.
21. That's huge for A.
Yeah. LiveCodeBench for coding, up 15. GPQA Diamond, complex reasoning, up 10. Humanities last exam, up 6. And artificial analysis, on their own index, they actually placed DeepSeek R1 matching Gemini 2.5 Pro on coding tasks.
Matching Pro.
Wow, and tying with Gemini 2.5 Pro as the #2 AI lab overall on that specific index anyway, ahead of like Anthropic, Meta, NVIDIA, Alibaba in that ranking.
That is a serious shakeup, but the sources mentioned something interesting about how they got this boost.
Yeah.
It wasn't a totally new architecture, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's the interesting part. The main driver seems to be post-training reinforcement learning, RL.
Okay.
But here's the catch, or the trade-off, really. This better performance apparently comes at a cost of what the sources called extra thinking tokens.
Thinking tokens. Okay, explain that a bit. What does that mean practically?
Think of it like the model takes more internal steps, more computation to figure out the answer. Instead of just spitting out the text, the RL seems to have trained it to do more complex, like multi-step reasoning internally before giving the final output.
You're right.
And those internal steps, they show up as higher token usage when you run it. So on that AIME test set, the new model used about 23,000 tokens per question on average. Compared to the previous model's 12,000, so nearly double.
Wow. So it thinks harder, but it costs more tokens per query.
Basically, yeah. Smarter, but potentially more expensive to run depending on the task and pricing. That's a key detail for anyone deploying it.
Definitely. Now, is this kind of intelligence trickling down? Are there smaller versions getting these reasoning boosts?
Yes, and this is potentially really exciting. There's news about a distilled version. DeepSeek R1 0528 Qwen 3 8B.
Okay, quite a name.
Yeah, but the idea is it takes those chain of thought, deeper reasoning methods from the big R1 model and distills them down into the much smaller Qwen 3 8 billion parameter base model.
And does it work?
Apparently, yes. Reports say this distillation boosts the small model's score by 10% on AA.
10% is significant for a small model.
And it allows it to match the reasoning ability of the much bigger Qwen 3 235B thinking model on certain tasks.
Okay, that is a leap. Getting that level of reasoning in an 8B model.
Exactly. could make powerful reasoning much more accessible, cheaper, maybe even runnable locally for some things.
Lots of possibilities there.
And one other technical thing mentioned for the main R1 model, its ability to do its reasoning directly in the user's language.
Oh, instead of translating to English internally.
Right, so if you ask in Spanish, it can apparently reason through the problem in Spanish.
That could be huge for multilingual performance.
Yeah.
Better accuracy, less lost nuance.
Potentially, yeah. Big implications there.
Okay, so we've got raw power, clever distillation. But what about the practical side? Price versus performance. How does DeepSeek R1.1 specifically stack up?
Right, R1.1 seems positioned right there, price to performance. And one view, backed by a chart mentioned from Artificial Analysis, suggests R1.1 significantly beats Gemini 2.5 Flash on that metric.
Better bang for your buck, basically.
Potentially, yeah. You might get similar, maybe even better results for less cost, depending on your specific use case.
So a strong contender for maybe more budget-sensitive applications.
Seems like it. But, and this is important, Gemini 2.5 Flash has its own unique strengths.
Right, the huge context window.
Exactly. That massive 1 million token context window is a major differentiator. And it's highlighted as being really good at tasks like multi-document retrieval or like inserting info into big existing texts.
Right, jobs that need to handle tons of context at once.
Precisely. So it really shows that trade-off again. You're
Yeah.
balancing speed, like with Flash, versus quality, maybe like Gemini Pro or DeepSeek R1 or R1.1 versus price. Different tools for different jobs.
It's never simple, is it?
Nope. And just quickly on coding, R1.1 also did well on the AIME polyglot benchmark.
That test-fixing code in multiple languages.
Yeah. It got a 70.7% pass at 2 score, which is almost neck and neck with Claude Opus 4.
Really? Opus scored what? Slightly higher?
Only 1.3% higher, reportedly, but likely at a very different cost.
The cost. What was the estimate for DeepSeek?
Using their API, the cost for that benchmark run was apparently around $3.05 off peak, but jumped to $12.20 during peak hours.
Still potentially very competitive with Opus, especially off-peak.
Interesting. And is the community already brainstorming ways to use these models?
Oh, yeah. There's talk about, like, hybrid workflows.
Side of house.
Using the big R10528 maybe as the architect, leveraging its strong reasoning to plan out complex tasks,
Okay.
and then pairing it with a smaller, faster model like their older V30328 to act as the editor or implementer for the detailed work.
Like a planner worker setup.
Exactly. Could give you a good mix of high-level smarts and cost efficiency for the execution. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, away from just performance and cost, toward understanding how these models actually work internally.
Right. And there's a significant move here from Anthropic towards more transparency.
What has they done?
They've open sourced some of their key methods for interpreting language models, including a tool called the Circuit Tracer library.
Circuit Tracer. Sounds intriguing. What does it let you do?
It enables something called mechanistic interpretability. So instead of the model just being this impenetrable black box,
Which they mostly are.
yeah, this lets researchers and potentially users generate these interactive graphs, attribution graphs,
Thanks.
meaning you can trace which specific neurons or parts of the neural network were activated and contributed most to generating a specific word or part of the output.
Whoa. Like following the signal path?
Kinda, yeah. It even plugs into platforms like Neuronpedia, where you can visually explore these circuits on demand.
So you can actually see a representation of the model's internal thought process for a given output. Why is that so important?
Exactly. It's about peeling back those layers, seeing how it got there, not just what it said.
Okay.
It's absolutely crucial for building trust, for finding biases, for understanding why models fail sometimes.
Debugging the AI's reasoning.
In a way, yeah. And ultimately, for making these systems safer and more reliable, it's moving beyond just the output to the why, a really vital step.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
Okay.
Stepping away from software and into the silicon,
Yeah.
the hardware powering all this. There was a comment from NVIDIA's CEO recently that raised some eyebrows.
Yes. Jensen Huang. In a recent interview, he reportedly made quite a claim.
Which was?
He stated that Huawei's latest AI chip is comparable in performance to NVIDIA's own H200 GPU.
Comparable to the H200. That's their top-tier data center chip currently, right?
It is. The H200 has got like 141 gigs of that super fast HBM3E memory, massive bandwidth.
Right.
And previous analyses often put Huawei's chips more around the level of NVIDIA's previous generation, the H100.
So if Huang is right, that suggests Huawei has made a pretty big leap very quickly.
Potentially, yes.
Now, the sources mentioned a lot of chatter about why he might say that. People weren't just taking it purely as a technical fact.
That's right. There was quite a bit of speculation about, potential strategic motives.
Like what?
Well, some suggested it might be aimed at demonstrating that there is strong competition in the AI chip market.
Which could maybe influence U.S. export rules or push back against monopoly concerns.
Potentially. Those were some of the theories floated. If strong competition exists, maybe restrictions aren't as necessary, or maybe NVIDIA doesn't look quite so dominant.
Interesting angle. And from a purely technical view, if Huawei has matched the H200.
Then, as the sources noted, it could change the conversation around U.S. export controls limiting NVIDIA's sales of high-end chips to China. If competitive alternatives are available locally, well, it impacts the rationale for those controls.
Right. A complex situation on the hardware front.
Okay, let's pivot to the cutting edge of AI applications. Agents. Systems doing tasks on their own. Yes. The sources highlighted this concept of autonomous software engineer agents, or droids, as one company, Factory AI, apparently calls them.
Droids. Okay. What can these droids do?
Well, according to a discussion on the Latent Space podcast, they're described as being capable of tasks like reading code, writing code, testing it, and even merging pull requests across entire code bases.
Not just fixing small bugs, but working across the whole project.
That's the description, yeah. Full code base operations.
Okay, that sounds significantly more capable than previous coding assistants.
And here's where it gets really provocative. The claim is that these droids are so capable, they might make standard coding benchmarks like SWA-bench obsolete.
Obsolete. SWA-bench is widely used to test how well models fix bugs. Why would these agents make it irrelevant?
It suggests a potential shift, moving away from standardized, maybe slightly artificial benchmark tasks towards evaluating these agents on more practical, real-world, end-to-end software engineering capabilities. If the agent can manage a whole PR across a real code base, maybe testing it on isolated bug fixes doesn't capture its true ability anymore.
So the evaluation needs to catch up with the capability.
That seems to be the implication. They're tackling complexity in a way that old benchmarks maybe just don't measure effectively.
And this connects to another point in the sources, something about cybersecurity and vibe coding.
Right, yeah. The idea there is, as LLMs make it super easy for almost anyone to generate code that works functionally, sometimes called vibe coding.
Just getting something running quickly.
Exactly. There's this growing expectation, or maybe hope, that these future automated coding agents, these droids, they should be built to handle things like good architecture and security best practices by default.
Unlike maybe some human vibe coders who might not have deep security knowledge.
Yeah, precisely. The observation is that some developers churning out code quickly today might miss fundamentals, creating risks. So the expectation is that these sophisticated agents need to be better building secure, well-architected code should be part of their core function, raising the bar automatically.
Interesting expectation. Okay, finally, let's look at a new platform designed for these kinds of more involved AI tasks. Perplexity AI launched Perplexity Labs.
Yeah, this sounds like more than just their usual search or research modes. Labs is described as a new mode specifically for complex multi-tool AI workflows.
Multi-tool? What kind of workflows are we talking about?
Think tasks that need multiple steps, different kinds of analysis or generation.
Yeah.
Like building a trading strategy using market data, creating interactive dashboards, doing really deep real estate research, pulling from lots of sources, maybe even deploying little interactive web apps.
It's much more involved than just asking a question, getting an answer.
Yeah, definitely. And unlike their deep research mode, Labs apparently invests more time in the process. It uses coding tools, it can browse the web headlessly.
Like interact with websites programmatically.
Right. And has design capabilities.
Yeah.
And importantly, it organizes all the files and outputs generated during the workflow into an Assets tab.
Assets tab. So it manages the whole project for you, essentially.
Seems like it's leaning that way, more like a research or analyst assistant.
Okay.
The sources position it as a tool aiming to sort of democratize complex processes like scientific experimentation or handling tasks that need lots of back and forth with different tools and managing all the intermediate results.
Interesting. How does something like Labs fit in compared to just, say, using a powerful model like Opus or Gemini directly in a chat interface?
Well, the community discussion mentioned those comparisons. People are weighing Labs against the cost and maybe the context limits you hit when trying to do super complex multi-step things directly with those big models.
Right, managing the state and the different outputs could get messy.
Exactly. And the broader idea suggested in one source is that these kinds of advanced AI assistants, orchestrating multiple tools and managing assets, they could potentially start eating into traditional web search volume over time.
Because you get the complex answer or the finished product directly, instead of searching for pieces yourself.
That's the potential implication, yeah. A shift towards more direct, complex task completion within these platforms.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the big picture here for you, the listener? We've seen these major strides in open models like DeepSeek really challenging the closed ones.
Yeah, performance is getting incredibly competitive.
And new tools like Circuit Tracer starting to give us a peek inside the AI's mind, moving towards understanding how they work.
Which is crucial for trust and safety.
Then there are shifts in the hardware race, with NVIDIA's CEO commenting on Huawei. The landscape is always changing there.
Absolutely. Global competition heating up.
And these glimpses of truly autonomous coding agents, the droids, potentially making us rethink how we even measure coding skill.
Yeah, a shift towards real-world task evaluation seems likely.
Plus, platforms like Perplexity Labs, aiming to tackle those really complex multi-step workflows that used to be purely manual or require cobbling together lots of tools.
It really feels like the pace isn't slowing down at all, just constantly pushing boundaries everywhere.
It really underscores that progress isn't just in one area, right? It's model architecture, training data and methods, interpretability, the hardware underneath, the applications on top. They're all advancing together and feeding off each other.
Definitely an interconnected ecosystem, all accelerating.
So here's something to chew on. If these autonomous agents are getting good enough to potentially make traditional coding tests obsolete, and if platforms are popping up to handle complex analysis and research using multiple tools and managing all the pieces for you, how fundamentally might your own day-to-day work or your learning or research processes, how might they be reshaped, like really soon?
Yeah. What skills become the most valuable when the tools themselves can handle so much of the inherent complexity?
What does it mean for you when the heavy lifting gets automated? Something to think about.